Suzerain is the premier political simulator game, which I'm sure many of you are familiar with if you clicked on this video. But if you aren't, you play as the president of the nation of Sordland. Suzerain is set in an alternate universe, so imagine a world caught in a Cold War, not between just superpowers like in our world, but more so between ideals. On one side, there's Malinovism, an uncompromising version of communism, where the nations who are under it actually follow a much more communistic, socialistic worldview. It's a nation where workers actually own the means of production. Farm workers are organized in workers' communes and co-ops. They actually hold fast to the ideals of a Marxist society. And on the other side is Arcasian liberalism, or as we would know it, capitalism. Again, in this world, they actually hold much tighter to its core principles. Instead of a more corporatist mixed economy, as most capitalist economies actually are, they actually have privatized public services, social welfare at an absolute minimum. They rely more on private military companies than state armies to defend themselves, and regulations are very lax or non-existent. This is the world of Suzerain. It's a political simulator that immerses you in a high-stakes struggle where ideology shapes nations and the lives of the citizens in it. At the heart of this ideological battleground lies Sordland. It's a nation at a crossroads. Decades of turmoil have left it fractured, a recession cripples its economy, political corruption festers, and deep state actors maintain control of its critical institutions, and its people are divided. It's a country desperate for leadership, teetering between democratic reform and authoritarian control. And that's where you come in as President Anton Rain in Suzerain, the game, which is really good. You should really check it out. But that's not really what I wanted to talk about. I wanted to talk about the new prequel in development, The Conformist. It is a narrative, semi-sandbox RPG where you play as Orwin Myst, a political propagandist nominally hired by the current administration, but you can choose what political party to support. So in today's video, I just want to talk and break down what we know and why I'm excited. But I also do want to say quickly, there's not that much footage, so I will just be using a lot of regular Suzerain footage. Again, check on Reddit, you can see a lot more photos. There's really not too many videos out, but I just wanted to let that be known. So before I actually talk about the game, I want to give a bit more preamble for what the political situation looks like in 1932 Sordland. Because obviously in the games you're playing in the 50s and the 60s. You don't really get to see what it was like right after the Civil War. So, in the lore, a civil war took place in 1929 between the nationalist and monarchist general Edward Lutheran, who led a coup against President Artur Wissi, who had recently led a bloodless revolution against the king of Sordland. He was locked in battle with General Ricard, who led the socialist and communist forces in the country. And after months of hard fighting, a new leader emerged, Colonel Sol, leader of the 6th Army, who was basically neutral, but he more so supported the nationalist forces. He decided to attack both armies, from the nationalists and the communists, at the Battle of Holsord, the capital of Sordland, ultimately defeating both forces in battle and capturing General Lutheran. Meanwhile, General Ricard was killed during the battle. This led, finally, to the end of large-scale fighting and the proclamation of a new republic with new elections. But there was only one possible party to vote for, the USP, or United Sordland Party, with Colonel Sol in charge of it, and with that, he became Sordland's new president. This game takes place in Holsord, still recovering from the horrors of war and political repression. But you play as Orwin Myst, and his story begins in the small town of Passay in Bergia, a poor southern region of the Kingdom of Sordland. As the son of a Sordish military officer, your life was basically predetermined from birth. You were born into the middle class and considered an ethnic Sord, a privileged position in the culturally diverse region. At the age of 13, as punishment by your father, he decided to send you to military school, despite your mother's wishes to enroll you in a religious institute. At first, you found dormitory life difficult, but you quickly got used to your new environment. Then, at the age of 18, your family lives forever changed when one day, the greatest sea power in the whole world, the Valgos Empire, blockaded and forcefully isolated the country. The price of bread increases from a single ren to 1,000, making the Sordish currency worthless. In order to help the family, you worked a job to help make ends meet. At 21, after 3 years of hard work and despite the economically dire situation, your father's military renown gave you the opportunity of studying at a university amongst aristocrats. In order to make use of this privilege, and with both of your parents' blessings, you left home for the Imperial Academy in the largest city of the region, Daer. You thought this would be your way to be free and your own man inside the kingdom. Then, when you're 26, it happens. Throngs of revolutionaries led by Arthur S. Wissey walked into the Palace of Holsord and were welcomed by the King's Guard. King Edmund was forced to abdicate, and Wissey declared the end of the monarchy. The news arrived late to the people of Daer, who reacted in shock and confusion. In the following days, the Republic was proclaimed, and revolutionaries began targeting people with connections to the King's army. Your father was among them. While Arthur was attempting to stabilize the situation, he promised to hold elections, the first in Sordland's history. He made many bold reforms and drastically increased civil rights and political freedom. Previously silenced groups were now at the forefront of the political and ideological battles now spreading across the country. Then one day, a group of armed policemen came to campus and arrested you for crimes against the revolution. Your father also became a wanted man, but he was nowhere to be found. You get sent to prison and have to survive. After 2 years in prison, you wake up to a loud commotion. A group of soldiers were freeing prisoners, claiming that they were there to restore the legitimate administration. Soon after, you finally understood what happened. The old chief of the King's army, General Lutheran, had taken control of the capital and canceled the first scheduled elections. President Wissey was arrested and martial law was declared to restore stability. Life under Lutheran's military junta was not easy. You managed to finally connect with your father again, who advised you to stay at home and protect your family, warning you of a larger conflict to come. You did your best to look after your mother and your sister in your father's absence. Despite everything, your sister seemed happy to have you around. To help support your family, you worked jobs to stay busy and support them. Then the Civil War started, and in an attack on your hometown, a shell directly hit your house, destroying half the building. Luckily, you and your sister were unharmed, but your mother wasn't so lucky. You weren't even able to have a proper funeral for her. Then, later, a colonel, Tarkin Sol, initiated an unexpected attack at the capital, defeating both General Lutheran and Rickard's main forces. Much to the relief of many, his victory brought an official end to the devastating and costly war. He formed the United Sordland Party and declared himself the president of Sordland. The people saw him as a savior, and this is where the game officially begins, with you now working at the State Educator Corps as a propagandist for the new Solist regime. Your life is now a tightrope between loyalty, survival, and subversion. Now, you might have seen the footage from the game, but I haven't actually touched too much on what type of game this is. It's pretty similar to Disco Elysium, at least game design wise. You play as a regular person who has to walk around and talk to people to advance the story and plot. From screenshots and gameplay shown, there are multiple districts to traverse through and multiple locations to visit, from pubs to the university. There's also a unique propaganda system. So essentially the main branching choices in the game all relate around which faction you want to support. There are 4 factions. There is the USP, or United Sordland Party, which is the Solist Party that supports Colonel Sol and his views for a more authoritarian democracy, where you still have rights, but certain things just you're not allowed to talk about. The next faction is the Liberals, who is made up of people who want more free market policies and a more open democracy. The next faction is the Black Battalion, who are the nationalist and monarchist faction who supported Lutheran in the war. And the final faction is the Syndicate, who is the remaining socialist and communist supporters in the country. Now, this next piece of information I'm going to say is unconfirmed, but apparently the major branching choice for each path is whether or not you support open revolt or only want to help them win the 1933 election, which, if true, is super cool. Now, as part of the propaganda system, as I was mentioning, in each district you can put up or tear down posters that support or oppose the faction you support. And eventually, as you play the game, you'll be in charge of whole propaganda teams who can blanket districts with propaganda of your choice. Along with balancing your professional life, you'll have to balance bills and your family. So making sure that your father and sister can still survive and you have enough money. So it's a bit more like Papers, Please in that aspect as well, where your professional life and choices affect your personal ones. So I'm very excited. I'm glad that we're finally going to get some more stories in the Suzerain universe, but from the perspective of a lower level individual. Like, usually you play as a power broker in the Suzerain games. You're the one making choices, and then the little people have to live with your consequences. So it's going to be interesting to actually be a low level individual who has to deal with consequences instead of just make them. I'm also curious to how the story is going to play out because if you haven't played Suzerain yet, go ahead and play it. But, this isn't really a spoiler. But we know how the story ends. Sol wins the election, no problem. So I wonder if the alternate paths are going to be super schizo and wonky since they're just going to be non-canon. There's just a lot about this game that's piquing my interest. I'm also interested to see another disco-like hit the gaming scene that's almost entirely focused on politics. From everything we know, I think it seems like it's going to be a great game. We don't have any info on a release date, but they did drop some beta keys in the Discord that people have played, so the game is being actively worked on. It is currently in pre-alpha. But Torpor Games is a small studio, but they always release quality stuff, even if they usually have to do a lot of balancing after stuff is released. So I'm interested to see what comes next, either the Suzerain expansion or the Conformist. I really do hope that the Conformist comes out first before the next supposed Galmland DLC. I think it's going to attract a much larger audience since there's more than just political management and actual gameplay, not just essentially reading a choose your own adventure book, which I obviously have no problem with, but I think a lot of gamers, it turns them off. So, are you going to join the Soulists, the Liberals, the Black Battalion, or the Syndicate? I'd really be interested to know what factions people are going to join first. I'll probably go for a Liberal, then a Black Battalion, just because I think those sound like the most interesting. But, let me know if you're excited for the game. That's really all I have. Thank you for watching. Please like, subscribe, all the usual YouTube nonsense. Thank you so much for 1,000 subs. Please remember that Jesus loves you.